about 3:30 p.m. Moscow time, and stepped out into a very raw, familiar grayness. There was a winter smell to the air, almost nostalgic. The trees were Thanksgiving turned, and the sky had the turkey-laden gray pumpkin color. I saw 3 large square-faced women arm in arm, marching across the airfield laughing and joking as they came. They were evidently workers just going off shift. They had gray coveralls and jackets with engineer caps and carried lunch buckets. They stopped beside a truck that had paused and started beating against the closed window, drawing the attention of the other women inside with some half hello and half joke at the driver, who was obviously their buddy, because they all pointed fingers at each other, laughing uproariously together, there on the Moscow airstrip in the grim light, swinging their lunch pails and cutting up. My in-tourist guided name was Helen, a very pleasant and attractive large-boned young woman in her 30s. She was born in the East near Japan, and her father, who'd been a military man, was dead. She lived with her mother now, and she said that she and her mother had to learn to do a lot of things for themselves, since there are so few men around these days, and service is so hard to get. In Russia, you carry your own bags in airports and hotels. This at first struck me as oppressive because, of course, carrying a laden bag up 7 flights of stairs when the elevator isn't working is not fun. But the longer I stayed there, the fairer it seemed, because in this country it appears that everything is seen in terms of food. That is, the labor of one's hands is measured by how much food you can produce, and then you take that and compare its importance to the worth of the other work that you do. Some men and women spend their whole lives, for instance, learning and doing the infinitely slow and patient handwork of retouching Persian blue tiles down in Samarkand to restore the ancient mausoleums. It is considered very precious work, but antiquities have a particular value, whereas carrying someone else's bag does not have a very high priority, because it is not very productive either of beauty or worth. If you can't manage it, then that's another story. I find it a very interesting concept. It's about 30 miles from the airport to the city of Moscow, and the road and the trees and the drivers could have been people from northern Westchester in late winter, except I couldn't read any of the signs. We would pass from time to time incredibly beautiful, old, uncared-for Russian Orthodox-style houses with gorgeous painted wooden colors and outlined ornate windows. Some of them were almost falling down. But there was a large ornate richness about the landscape and architecture on the outskirts of Moscow, even in its gray winter, that seemed to tell me immediately that I was not at home. I stayed at the Hotel Yanist, which is one of the international hotels of Moscow. The room was a square studio affair with Hollywood bed couches and a huge picture window looking towards the National Stadium, over a railroad bridge, with a very imposing view of the university buildings against the skyline. But everything was so reminiscent of New York in winter that even as I sat at 9:30 p.m. after dinner, writing, looking through the blinds, there was the sound of a train and light on the skyline, and every now and then the taillights of an auto curving around between the railroad bridge and the hotel. And it felt like 100 nights that I remembered along Riverside Drive, except that just on the edge of the picture was the golden onion-shaped dome of a Russian Orthodox church. Before dinner I took a short walk. It was already growing dark, but down the street from the hotel was the stadium stop on the metro, which is a subway. I walked down there and into the metro station, and I stood in front of the escalators for a while, just watching the faces of the people coming and going. It felt like instant 14th Street of my childhood, before blacks and Latins colored New York. Except everyone was much more orderly, and the whole place seemed much less crowded. The thing that was really